All 5 of you are hereby banished from Ileayo, not to ever set foot on the land again." The crowd screamed in approval. The people didn't know what was happening. The ones running were running, those crying were crying. Their king had just been murdered, or so they thought. Once upon a time, in a small village called Ileayo, there lived a young woman named Ireti and her husband Olabode. Olabode was a native of Ileayo, while Ireti was from a neighboring village called Ileagon. Ileagon was a very big village sitting on a vast expanse of land, but occupied by only a handful of villagers. Many years ago in Ileagon, an old woman and her only child were stoned to death because she used sorcery to raise her child from the dead, knowing full well that sorcery of any form was prohibited and anyone caught practicing sorcery would be stoned to death. While breathing her last breath, she placed a curse on the land. She said, "For this that you have done to me and my only child, the cry of newborn babies would be scarcely heard in this land." From that day on, the women of Ileagon hardly conceived. The few ones that did mostly die while giving birth or give birth to still babies. Only very few successful births were recorded in the land since the curse, hence the name Ileagon, which means land of barrens. When Olabode brought Ireti to his parents to introduce her as his wife-to-be, they both objected to the marriage. His father said to him, "Olabode, have you forgotten the curse that was placed on her land many years ago? I need a daughter-in-law that would give me grandchildren, and not one that is a barren." His mother, Titilayo, supported her husband, saying, "I know Ireti is a very good girl and you genuinely love her, but you must listen to your father. Our people say, what an elder sees while sitting, a child cannot see even when he climbs an iroko tree." On hearing these hurtful words from her would-be in-laws, Ireti was heartbroken. She stood frozen with hot tears raining down her lovely eyes. But Olabode did not let his parents' words stop him from marrying Ireti, the woman after his heart. The bond between Olabode and Ireti was not forged on mere emotional spark or lustful desire, but was forged on something stronger, love and gratitude. Their love story began in the most unlikely way. One day, Olabode was tapping palm wine from a very tall palm tree at the border between Ileayo and Ileagon when he heard a loud crashing sound just beneath him. He looked down and saw a beautiful young woman lying lifeless on the ground. Quickly, he climbed down to see what he could do to help her. When he got to her, he was surprised to see how beautiful she was. He tried to resuscitate her, but to no avail. So, he took her to his hut to find a way to bring her back to life. After much effort, she suddenly jerked out of her unconsciousness. Olabode's heart swelled with joy witnessing the resurrection of the beautiful maiden he had fought so desperately to save. When Ireti was fully awake, Olabode asked her what happened, how she ended up unconscious in the forest. She thanked him for saving her life, then told him, "On my way to the stream to fetch water, I was accosted by 3 fierce-looking masquerades. Fearing their wrath and desiring to evade their menacing presence, I ran with every ounce of strength within me until I stumbled and fell beneath the palm tree where you found me." From that moment on, an unusual bond formed between Olabode and Ireti. Seeing his parents were not in support of his plan to marry Ireti, Olabode's heart was broken. He approached his uncles, aunties, and other relatives, but just like his parents, they all gave their disapproval. Left with no other choice, Olabode announced to his family, "I would be leaving Ile-Ayo to join Ireti in Ile-Agan to save you all the agony and embarrassment of seeing me and Ireti together." On hearing this, his parents were surprised and at the same time very worried. After all efforts to make Olabode change his mind failed, his parents finally shifted their position on the matter and gave their blessing and approval for their union. So, Ireti and Olabode got married under Ile-Agan native law and customs. After their marriage, Ireti moved into Olabode's house in Ile-Ayo, and there they lived happily together as husband and wife. But their happiness didn't last for so long. Years after their marriage, there was no cry of a baby in their home, neither was there a sign of any coming soon. Olabode's parents did not help matters. They were constantly taunting him about his decision to marry a barren woman, which they kicked against from the start. He would always respond, "Baba, Mama, it is only the gods that give children. The gods are wise. When it's our turn, I'm confident they'll give us our own children." Olabode knew deeply in his heart that the gods had abandoned them, but he kept encouraging himself and his wife with the hope that perhaps fate would be kind enough to give them a child. They sought help from all the places they knew, but nothing worked. So, after 7 years of their marriage, Ireti finally resolved to her fate that she was indeed a barren woman who was incapable of giving her beloved husband a child he desperately needed. One day, she sat her husband down to discuss the matter with him. She told him, "I hate to see you suffer for my sake. I know how much you love and cherish me, and I'll forever be grateful for that. But I think it's about time you did as your parents said and take another wife from among your people to bear you children." Olabode quickly cut in and said, "Ireti, what nonsense are you saying? It is either you or no one else, whether you bear me children or not." Ireti in her heart was very delighted to hear those reassuring words from her husband and wished she could bear him a child. On the 10th anniversary of their wedding, Olabode's father, who had been bedridden for months, passed away. Before his death, he told his son, "You see how your stubbornness and cowardice had made me a father without any grandchildren in my lifetime." Feeling like the disappointed child, Olabode said to his father, "Baba, I am very sorry I let you down and I disappointed you. Perhaps it is the will of the gods for things to happen this way." His father told him, "My son, I am only disappointed, but I don't blame you. You did what you felt was right. I wish you and your wife well, and I pray the gods grant your desire someday. I'm leaving. Please take good care of your mother for me." Those were his last words to Olabode before he gave up the ghost. Exactly 3 months after Olabode's father's death, the unexpected happened. Ireti, who had been called the barren woman for 10 years, became pregnant. When she broke the news to Olabode, he could not believe his ears. He was overwhelmed with excitement. His mother, Titilayo, was even more excited as she would finally become a grandmother in her lifetime. Olabode threw a big party that night to celebrate his wife's pregnancy. From the moment Ireti broke the news of her pregnancy, Olabode and his mother never allowed her do any chores in the house. They were the ones doing everything for her. She was treated like a queen. According to them, they didn't want her to stress herself doing anything that would affect the baby in her womb. Olabode, in the euphoria of expecting a baby, started buying baby items. Unsure of their unborn baby's gender, he bought double of everything, both male and female. Ireti was grateful to the gods for finally taking away her shame and reproach by blessing her with the fruit of the womb. Every morning, she and her husband would pray to the gods to give her safe delivery and a healthy baby. One morning, Olabode got up very early, prepared breakfast for Ireti, then cleaned the hut, after which he told his wife, who was already 8 months pregnant, that he was going to the forest to tap palm wine for a customer who had contracted him to supply palm wine for his daughter's wedding. She gave him a very long and tight goodbye hug before he left. On his way to the forest, Olabode was reminiscing on the long hug his wife gave him before leaving the house, because Ireti wasn't known to be a hugger. So, he discarded it as a consequence of her pregnancy hormones. Unknown to him that would be their last hug and the last memory he would have about Ireti, his beloved wife. Few moments after Olabode started climbing the palm tree, before he could get to the top, the weather suddenly became cloudy and it started raining heavily with loud thundering. Olabode was surprised because there was no sign of rain when he set out that morning. He paused for a moment, contemplating whether to continue climbing up or climb down and wait for the rain to subside. In his moment of contemplation, the palm tree was struck by lightning, which made him lost balance and fell from the tree to the ground. He fell flat on his back and laid helplessly on the cold and wet soil, with the rain profusely pouring down on him. That morning, it rained heavily for over 5 hours. When the rain stopped eventually, the whole village was flooded with water, so the villagers could not go about their daily business. Olabode usually come back from the forest before sunset, but that fateful day, it was dusk yet no sign of her husband, so Ireti was very worried. She went to her mother-in-law. "Mama, since morning that Olabode left for the forest, he hadn't returned, and I am very worried. I have a strange feeling that something is wrong." Her mother-in-law tried to calm her down by saying, "Ireti, you worry yourself too much. Nothing has happened to your husband. You know today is an unusual day in the village with the heavy rainfall and the flooding that followed. I'm sure he will be home once the flood subsides." Her mother-in-law's words gave her a bit of respite, so she went back home hoping her husband comes back to her soon. Exhausted from her worries and the weight of her pregnancy, Ireti dozed off sitting on a stool in front of her hut. In her sleep, she had a dream of the day her path and Olabode's path crossed many years ago, only that in the dream, it was Olabode being chased by 3 fierce-looking masquerades. She was on the palm tree when she saw a man tumbled violently beneath her. She was paralyzed with fear when she looked down and saw her husband on the floor, lying helplessly. In her case, she could not climb down to help him. Olabode told her, "Please, take good care of our child and my mother and give them the best life they deserve." Suddenly, she heard someone calling her name and gently tapping her shoulder. When she opened her eyes, it was Titilayo, her mother-in-law, calling her name. She was thankful it was all a dream. So she asked, "Mama, where is my husband? Is he back yet?" Titilayo told her no, he wasn't back yet, and that's what brought her to check if he was back, but met her sleeping outside the hut. Ireti got even more worried because her fear of what might have happened to her husband was becoming more vivid. It was already late in the night, but no sign of Olabode, so a search party was organized to go look for him. The search wasn't an easy one because of the flooding, and it was still threatening to rain. After hours of searching, they finally got to the spot where Olabode was lying. At this time, he was stone cold and completely lifeless. Fear gripped the men who saw him. They looked around to find a clue as to the cause of his death. They were able to deduce that he fell off the palm tree. The men carried Olabode's lifeless body back to his house. Upon approaching the compound, they saw a small crowd of villagers in the compound trying to cheer Ireti up and to assure her husband would be brought back alive. Unfortunately, Olabode was brought back dead. When Ireti saw her husband's corpse, she collapsed and fell heavily to the ground. Everyone's attention was shifted from Olabode's body to Ireti, his widow. Efforts were made to resuscitate her. After about an hour, she finally regained consciousness. But before she could have the time to grieve her husband's death, she went into labor. The midwife was immediately brought in to take the delivery. After thoroughly examining her condition, the midwife told everyone that she wasn't due for delivery until a month's time, that such early delivery could endanger the life of both mother and child. Left with no other option, Titilayo, Ireti's mother-in-law, asked the midwife to go ahead with the delivery. After several hours, the baby was delivered. However, it was a stillbirth. There was another round of wailing and weeping in the compound. Ireti fainted once again when she heard that her baby did not come out alive. This time around, all efforts to revive her proved abortive. They called in the village medicine man to resuscitate her, but after several attempts, the medicine man announced to the crowd that she had given up the ghost. There was pandemonium in the compound. Everyone was confused. They didn't know whether to weep for Olabode, whose corpse was lying in his hut, or his son who didn't have the chance to breathe his first breath, or his wife Ireti, who could not mourn her husband nor carry her baby in her arms. Titilayo became the center of attention. Everyone gathered around her, consoling her for the calamity that befell her. She wept profusely for her beloved son, her daughter-in-law, and her grandson. In the wee hour of the morning, while the weeping and mourning was still going on, the rain resumed again. The villagers took shelter in Olabode's hut and other adjoining huts, some standing inside while others were outside observing the weather. Suddenly, they heard the cry of a newborn baby. Everyone was surprised and confused at the same time. They traced the crying to where Ireti's dead son was placed under the rain. The boy that was born still has been given life again by the rain. There was a sudden outburst of joy in the compound. The cry of the baby reignited the atmosphere, which was once very tense and melancholic. The child was cleaned up and presented to his grandmother Titilayo, who was all lit up with joy seeing her first and only grandchild. There was, however, something very unusual about the child's skin. The midwife took a good look at the child and observed that he looked fairer than most children she had ever delivered in the village. She declared, "He is an albino. The gods have dealt us another blow." Suddenly, there was another bout of sadness in the room. Ileayo has a bias against albinism. An albino in the village was regarded and treated as a curse from the gods because from the inception of the village, no albino had ever lived up to 10 years old. Before their 10th birthday, they disappear never to be seen again, causing their parents and the whole village great pain and sorrow. Despite the midwife's declaration, Titilayo clung to her grandson as if her whole life depended on him. She said, "The gods that took my son have given me another one to continue in his father's stead. This child you see will be greater than his father and his father's fathers, and his name is Aremu." The news of Aremu's birth and his parents' death spread like wildfire throughout the village and all the surrounding villages. Some of the villagers viewed Aremu as a curse, while others saw him as a blessing. So, Aremu grew up in the care of his aged grandmother, Titilayo. Being her only grandchild and only direct relative, one would expect Titilayo to overly pamper Aremu and treat him like a prince, but the reverse was the case. Titilayo treated him with iron hands. There were times young Aremu had to ask his grandmother, "Mama, why do you hate me so much?" Titilayo would laugh and say to her, "My dear Aremu, I love you more than anything in the world. You are my precious jewel. But you know, soon I'll leave you behind in this world to join your father and mother in the world beyond. When I'm gone, this world won't be kind to you. This village has never been kind to your type. So I must teach you to be strong and prepare you for that which is to come." Aremu, though too young to fully comprehend his grandma's words, understood a little about the villagers not being kind to him. Whenever he went out for errands or to play with his mates, he was always treated differently from the other kids and sometimes bullied and cursed by both the young and old. Growing up, Titilayo noticed that Aremu had a special gift, a gift she was so scared of, the same gift her husband, his grandfather, had, rainmaking. Rainmaking was perceived as a very dangerous occupation in Ileayo and environs. Many years ago, it used to be the practice in Ileayo and other neighboring villages that when a rainmaker failed to hold or call the rain whenever the king commanded, he would be executed immediately. This practice continued until the present king, King Jayeola, ascended the throne. The fear that the next king after King Jayeola might revert to the old practice was prevalent in the village. So, when parents notice that their kids have the gift, they do everything they could to either suppress it or direct their focus to some other gift or talent. But Aremu was a natural, unlike most other rainmakers that learned the art to be able to improve their skills. His own came naturally to him. All he needed was to focus his mind on the task, and he would get it done. One fateful morning, Aremu went to the bush to fetch firewood for his grandmother. On his way back, he heard faint voices from a distance discussing. He was surprised and at the same time curious because he had never seen anyone in that part of the bush before. His curiosity made him drop off the firewood he was carrying and started walking towards the direction of the voices. As he approached the spot, The voices became louder and clearer, so he hid himself behind a thick bush where he could see and hear the men clearly. Aremu instantly recognized all 5 men. They were all from the village. The leader of the group was Adesoji, King Jaiola's half-brother. With him were 2 of the king's guards and 2 respected palace chiefs, Chief Kosoko and Chief Oyaniyi. The subject of their discussion shocked Aremu to his core. He could not believe what he was hearing. Aremu waited for the men to conclude their discussion before leaving the spot he was hiding. When he got home, he said to his grandma, "Mama, how can one get audience with the king?" She told him, "Aremu, you have come again with your funny questions. Well, one gets audience with the king if only he requests for that person." The inquisitive young boy further asked, "But what will make the king request for anyone?" She thought for a while, then she said, "There are many reasons. For example, if he did something that pleased the king, or he did something that provoked him, then the king can send for him." Hearing his grandmother's answer, Aremu was elated. He hurriedly dashed out towards the king's palace. On his way, he thought to himself, "What can I do that would please a king? I don't know how to please anyone except Grandma. I only know how to provoke others." So he resolved he was going to provoke the king to get his attention. When Aremu got close to the palace, he hid behind a bush and observed that no one was watching. Then he looked to the bright sky and started calling the rain. Few moments later, there was heavy downpour engulfing only the king's palace. The king and everyone else was surprised because there was no sign of rain that afternoon. One of the palace guards came to tell the king that the rain was only falling in the palace and nowhere else in the village. The king came out and observed in awe that what the guards told him was true. Everyone was confused. "What is the meaning of this?" King Jaiola asked one of his counselors. The counselor answered and said, "My king, I do not know, but I know the last time this happened was immediately before Kabiyesi, your father, went to join his fathers in the afterlife." On hearing this, the king became worried, so he sent for the village rainmakers to stop the rain and the palace chief priest to interpret its meaning. Neither the rainmaker nor the chief priest could prefer any solution. The rainmakers tried all they could to stop the rain, but the more they tried, the heavier the rain became. They told the king that the rain wasn't natural. It could only be the handiwork of a more powerful rainmaker. So, the king instructed his guards and the rainmakers to search everywhere and bring the culprits to him. It didn't take time to find Aremu, who himself wanted to be found so he could have an audience with the king. When they found him, they took him to the king. When they brought him in, the king laughed uncontrollably and he exclaimed, "Aremu, the son of Olabode." Aremu was surprised that the king knew whom he was. Of course, everyone in the village knew Aremu, including the king, primarily because of the circumstances of his birth, the color of his skin, and the fact that he was the only albino who had lived up to 15 years of age without disappearing like others. The king asked Aremu, "Was it really you who called the rain?" Aremu answered, "Yes, my king," then told the king how sorry he was. The king further asked, "How did you manage to call the rain during Harmattan, the driest season in the land, when no rainmaker, not even the most powerful rainmaker there had ever been, was able to?" Aremu, sensing that the king, instead of being furious, was rather curious, decided to take advantage of the moment to sell himself to the king. Aremu told the king all there was to know about his abilities. The king then asked him why he did what he did. He told him, "My king, I did it because I wanted to get your attention. There is a very important message I have for you." At this point, the king became even more curious. He asked him what the message was, but Aremu in his wisdom told the king he couldn't say it in the presence of everyone. So the king asked everyone else to excuse them, leaving him with only Aremu, the head guard, chief priest, and 2 counselors. Aremu told the king how he overheard his half-brother Prince Adesoji, Chief Kosoko, and Chief Oyaniyi with 2 of his guards discussing how to kill him, the queen, and their 3 children during the forthcoming Iboju feast and take over the throne. The king and everyone else was shocked to hear what Aremu said. Even though shocked, they were not surprised. They knew Prince Adesoji never liked his brother the king and was always antagonizing him, but they never knew he could plot such evil against the king. The king thanked Aremu for bringing the news to him, but insisted that he must stay within the palace until after the Iboju feast. Aremu was surprised and at the same time scared. He then told the king that he couldn't leave his grandmother alone all by herself for days. The king told him, "Aremu, I know you are scared, but don't be afraid. I am doing this to protect you and to also ascertain that what you told me is true, that you do not have any ulterior motive. I will bring your grandmother to join you in the palace." When the palace guards that went to get Titilayo told her that Aremu was in the king's palace and that the king had sent for her, she was very scared. She knew Aremu had done something wrong. She asked the guards what happened, but no one told her. She cried all through the journey to the palace. On the day of the Iboju feast, the whole village was adorned in beautiful colors. Men and women, both young and old, all came out in their colorful costumes and masks. The feast was a masked party introduced by King Jaiola's late father to showcase the creativity of the villagers and mark the end of the Harmattan season. In the morning of the feast, Prince Adesoji, Chief Kosoko, Chief Oyaniyi, and the 2 guards set out very early to secure a vantage position where they could easily take down their targets. The plan was for the 2 guards to shoot the king, his wife, and their 3 children with their arrows once they mount the stage to do the royal dance, signifying the end of the event. As the feast drew towards its end, it was time for the royal dance. The king, his wife, and children mounted the stage in their elegant royal masks and costumes and began dancing. Few minutes into their dance, an arrow struck the king on his chest, piercing through his heart. Another struck the queen, and their 3 children were not left out. They all fell to the ground. There was chaos and confusion everywhere. The people didn't know what was happening. The ones running were running, those crying were crying. Their king had just been murdered, or so they thought. Few moments later, when the whole pandemonium had died down, with just the faint cry of the women in the air, King Jaiola, heavily guarded, emerged and climbed the stage. Everyone was in awe. Their confusion was heightened to another degree. If it wasn't the king that was shot, then who was it? They asked themselves. The king is alive? Prince Adesoji exclaimed and rushed towards the lifeless bodies on the stage. He removed their masks one after the other. Adesoji stood in shock when he saw his only son lying dead on the stage. When Chief Kosoko and Chief Oyaniyi saw the prince's reaction, they knew something terrible had happened. They rushed to the stage. Chief Oyaniyi collapsed to the floor when he saw his daughter's lifeless body while Chief Kosoko screamed, "No, not my son!" Meanwhile, the king's guard laid siege for the two girls who shot the arrows. Immediately after the shooting, they were apprehended. So they were dragged onto the stage to join their conspirators. They both saw their wife and daughter lying in the pool of their blood. At this point, one could vividly see the confusion on the face of the whole crowd. King Jayola told the crowd all that happened and how he made Chief Kosoko's first son dress like him, one of the guard's wives dressed as the queen, his brother's only son dressed as a prince, Chief Oyaniyi's daughter dressed as one of the princes, and the other guard's daughter dressed as the last princess. The crowd was marveled. The king instantly passed judgment on the 5 traitors. He told them, "You all know that the consequences of your action is death. But I'll be merciful unto you because your loved ones have paid the ultimate price on your behalf. However, from this moment on, all 5 of you are hereby banished from Ileayo, not to ever set foot on the land again." The crowd screamed in approval. The king then called Aremu and his grandmother to the stage. He thanked Titilayo for raising such a fine young man. Then he told the crowd that if not for the bravery of the 15-year-old Aremu, the albino boy that you all discriminate against and treat like an outcast, I and my family would have all been dead by now. From this day forward, any person in this village who shows any form of discrimination, bias, or ill treatment of an albino or anyone else with any peculiar condition would be publicly punished. He further declared that from that day on, Aremu and his grandmother would live in the palace and Aremu would become his personal rainmaker. Titilayo, crying, hugged her grandson and said, "Aremu, thank you for not bringing shame to me. I have always known you would make me proud someday. I wish your father and mother were here today to see all that you've done. But I know they are looking down right now with smile on their faces." Aremu could not hold back his tears. So ends the tale of Aremu, the stillborn albino boy who was brought back to life by the rain, orphaned at birth, predicted to die before he turned 10, maltreated and discriminated against by all, who saved the royal family from impending death and ultimately became the greatest rainmaker the kingdom had ever had. Thank you for watching. I would love to hear your opinion on this video in the comment section, and please don't forget to like and share this video. You can also support me by subscribing to my channel and turn on the post notification bell so you don't miss out on any of my updates. Thank you. Bye.